Okay, the purpose of this second brief is about community and people, to talk about the people that are here. I want to start by just establishing the basics. 3 million people live in this place that we call home. 3 million people. The Bay Area, by the way, the 9 counties that touch the Bay, that's about 7.5 million people. That's not nothing. It's not like the big metropolitan regions that we see, especially in Asia and elsewhere, but we're a population that is a major region among regions. I thought you'd be interested to know how our population breaks down. In 1990, would you believe that our population was 60% white residents? 60%. That was the majority. By the 2000s, we had become a non-majority community, meaning that there was no segment of the population that claimed more than 50%. And today, we are now 37% Asian, and then we are 30% white residents, and then we are 20% are Hispanic or Latino. And there are I thought you'd be interested to know that the Hispanic or Latino population by place of origin, they're mostly coming from Mexico, finding a path to Silicon Valley from Mexico. But then there are smaller percentages that are coming from other parts of Central America and South America. Our Asian population is coming from China and coming from account for the biggest shares. And that's followed by our Filipino Asians, followed by Vietnamese, and then miscellaneous others. So a very diverse population. This is something that is one of the most striking and telling things about Silicon Valley. 41% of our population born outside of the United States. No other region can make that claim. Then when you talk about members of our population who are speaking a language other than English at home, we're talking about more than 50% of our population. So we're tremendously diverse. Now, I would like to point out that when you take that population, which is international, 52% of that group of people living here are naturalized citizens. Another 30% are lawful permanent residents, and it's about 18% of our brothers, sisters, colleagues, friends that are undocumented in this economy. Now, we are the nation's most diverse, most internationalized metropolitan region, hands down. It is interesting, however, that we're starting to congregate as ethnicities and minority populations or ethnic populations. This is a map from 1980, and if you are green on the map, that means that it is unlikely that your neighbor looks like you. In other words, green means diverse. It means the opposite of homogeneous. It means that it's heterogeneous. And red means that there's a very high likelihood, more than 70% likelihood, that your neighbor looks just like you, that it is a homogeneous neighborhood. So that's what we looked like in 1980. In 1990, 10 years later, that's what we looked like. In 2000, look at that. Quite a bit of homogeneity setting in. Look at us in 2010, and that's what we look like today. So, international, diverse, but we're also choosing to live in neighborhoods where people look like us. It's an interesting factoid about us. Okay, so we said some interesting things about our population and its characteristics. Now I want to ask, how are we doing? How are people doing? And I don't know if you can tell, but that's a picture of bees buzzing in a beehive. And in a very respectful way, what I'm suggesting is that this morning, our morning briefing, our first briefing, we were talking about the beehive. That's what we were talking about. And we were marveling at how robust that beehive is, and how productive that beehive is, and how successful the beehive is. is behaving. Today, in this briefing now, we're going to talk about the bees. We're going to talk about the bees themselves. How are the bees faring? And we'll talk about this across many dimensions. Again, always doing it as objectively as we can, looking at things that we can measure precisely. By the way, this is a chart that shows the value added per worker. I'm showing you this chart again in the context of bees. I think it's really important that we understand that when you put up on the slides economic measures like productivity and output and profitability, those may be interesting, but they don't necessarily tell you anything about gross national or gross domestic happiness. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you how the people who are so productive, and by the way, most productive, the highest productivity in any metropolitan region. The way we get this is you take GDP, our regional product, or GRP, you could call it, gross regional product, and you divide it by the number of people in the workforce, and it's the highest level anywhere. So highly productive, highly profitable, all of these things happening, but doesn't necessarily tell you how the bee is doing. And that's what we want to understand as well this morning. Are people thriving? Is there a path to success? Is the success of the region being widely shared? We'll talk about that as well. So I want to start by talking about how we're feeling. There's actually quite a lot of good news. We're a healthy region. We stand apart on a number of health indicators, including life expectancy. Life expectancy in Silicon Valley is about 84 years old. That's the life expectancy. It changes by ethnicity. Asians have a higher life expectancy, but that's where we are, compared to 79 as the national life expectancy rate. There's tons of health indicators in the index. You should avail yourselves of them. I think they're all interesting. Picking two here. One is diabetes. One is the incidence of high blood pressure. Again, how are those bees doing? Are we under stress? Are we under pressure? And is that manifest in ways that are medical and measurable? And sure enough, about 30% of our population is experiencing high blood pressure. The state higher. So that's interesting. This is the share of our population, and it's a very important measure of individual well-being. So we track it over time, and it's good news. We're almost 100% insured. It's about 94, 95%. We'd like to see that be 100%. It spiked in 2013. That's when that correlates with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, and so now it's possible for most people in Silicon Valley, employed or not, to have health care. In well-being, including psychological well-being, and so I just want you to see here. I really do recommend the report. We go into a tremendous detail here, but we do have a significant portion of our population that self-identify as experiencing psychological distress. This means feeling anxiety or depression, feeling that way 5 days out of the week. And then it is significant that it's a higher percentage of our women experiencing those symptoms and a higher percentage of our children who are experiencing symptoms. So that's something that we should understand about our region. It's also interesting to know that about 20% of our population are mental health issues or for dependency issues, alcohol or drug issues, and spiked during the pandemic. Now with the pandemic in the rearview mirror, that's coming down again. So hopefully we're making progress on that score. But I want to go from here to talking about a very basic human need, and that would be housing on that Maslowian hierarchy. It's right there up at the top with food, and so it's a very important question for us to take up here as a region. How are we doing on the housing front? So let me take you through a number of indicators. Most of them are going to tell you what you already know and what you are already, and that's our housing is very expensive and it's very hard to come by. We thought that perhaps the pandemic would affect some of these numbers. Not so much, not happening. We thought that perhaps the departure of 134,000 people from the region would also have some ameliorating effect on these numbers. Not yet. We don't actually see it. We don't see any evidence that it's taking the pressure off of prices, pressure off of scarce resources. So that's your number, 190. The median home sale price is almost $2 million. That's a median. Remember, median means half of the homes sold are more than that, and half of the homes sold are less than that. So that's the breaking point. $1.9 million for a home. By the way, we also took a look at all of the home values, the value of all the homes. You can look it up on Zillow, easy enough. And so the average value of all of the homes in Silicon Valley is $1.6 million. So that's what we're talking about. These numbers, all the numbers I'll be showing you today, are the highest in the nation. We have the nation's highest housing prices any way that you measure it, and we'll take you through those measurements. That's what we need to understand about our region. It's a brutal, punishing, difficult region in which to be housed. And the trend lines are not positive. It's only getting worse. Here's your home ownership rates. And by generation, boomers are more established in the market than the rising generation behind them. So I'm one of those. And about 70% of boomers have managed to get into the housing here. Gen X, not as much. And then significantly, our Xennials and our Millennials, they are not breaking into this market very successfully. And then Gen Z is our youngest population. They're not there. They're virtually absent from the marketplace. So that's what it looks like. If you look at it overall, home ownership is less than 50% across our region. So that's sobering. Then, throughout the briefing today, we'll be reminding you of these things also track by race and ethnicity. And our region continues to have disparities, very striking and enduring disparities when we look at different racial groups. So the white residents have the highest rate of home ownership, followed by our Asian residents. And then at the other end of that continuum is where we find our Black or African American residents, or our Hispanic or our Latino residents. And the gap is 60% versus 30, 32, 34%. Now, the important question that immediately arises, what are we doing about it? Now, it's a very difficult problem. Remember, we're living in a place that is surrounded on three sides by water and is ringed by mountains, hills, and permanently protected open space. And we're already built out. So our entire terrain has already been developed. It's not like there's developable land out there. If we were in one of the Midwestern states, take your pick, this whole phenomenon that we were describing this morning, all of that heat, all of that intensity, all of that dynamism, it could just spread. It could just sprawl. No problem. But here we're hemmed in. And so that is what's driving the intensity that we're describing as well. It's a geographic feature. It's a structural feature. So when we ask the question, well, what are we doing about it? As if it were easy to just build. We can't do that easily. We can only do that with difficulty. We get that. And then it's also true, we always have to remember this, that the people who build houses are not the cities. Cities don't build houses. Cities allow housing to be built. And they can provide incentives for that housing to be built, but the people who actually build the houses are developers. And those developments have to pencil out. And all of those things are becoming increasingly difficult in Silicon Valley. And here's a chart that I think puts that in stark relief. This is a chart that is showing you how many new permits are being issued year by year. And as you can see, in this last calendar year, we issued about 4,500 new permits. That's what we did. So remember, 1.7 million people in the workforce. Remember that we added about 500,000 people during that 12-year run of economic expansion. Remember, we're still maintaining, and yet in this past year, 4,500 permits. That's what we did. That's less than half what we did the previous year, and it's less than half again what we did in the year before that. So it's not a good trend. It's not trending in our favor. But there are complexities, and we acknowledge those complexities. Here's another very important question. Of those units that are being approved, how many of those are going to be affordable to our workforce? And the chart shows you the number of approvals will actually be categorized as affordable. And affordable, that has a technical definition. It means that you can be making 50% of the median, or you can be at 50% and qualify for the financing that would be required. So the share of affordable units being permitted is actually is small and not growing. We're finding that hard to do as a region. Now, you probably know that the state is actually handing out quotas. The state has become deadly serious about the housing crisis in California. As a result, the state is handing out what is called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, RHNA. The acronym is pronounced RHNA. That's how you talk about it, RHNA. So the state has gone through several RHNA cycles, and we just completed one. And in that RHNA cycle, we were given a quota of housing units that we were supposed to provide as a region. We did not meet it. And actually, we didn't come close. We didn't come close. So now we're in a new cycle, brand new cycle. This time, the state is clamping down. They're saying, well, if you don't meet those targets, there will be consequences. And those consequences come in various forms, including fines or the loss of discretionary state dollars that could come to our region. And then finally, just things like builder's remedy, which say if certain conditions are met, that project can proceed without explicit local approval because it's already been zoned. So all of those things are happening. It's changing the power dynamic. We'll be asking you that question. In fact, if you think that's a good trend or if that's an ominous trend, we'll pose that in a few minutes. But here's how we're doing so far in the RHNA cycle. Just so you know, the current RHNA cycle. The current RHNA cycle says that our state needs to provide 200,000 new units. I'm sorry, that our region, this region needs to provide 200,000 new units by, I forgot, 2040, I think. And then it gives specific goals to every city. It gives the quota to ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. Then ABAG turns around and gives each city its quota, its amount. And this shows going collectively as a region across all of those cities. We're doing luxury housing. We're doing that. But the affordable housing at the same percentage rates. It's lagging behind. So that's where we stand as a region thus far. Now, the cost of these units is also increasing, so we need to be really mindful of that. There are a lot of cost drivers, but they include inflation, but they also include rising material costs, the complexities of those materials, as we have through policy tools said that they need to be meeting threshold standards or they need to be meeting environmental standards. So all of these things are cost drivers. Labor costs are also going up, and of course they would, as it's increasingly more difficult to live in a high-cost region. And so all of these factor into the cost of providing those additional units. And as you can see, the per unit number just keeps going up. And it's now, it's above 700,000, 750,000 to build an affordable unit from start to finish. And that's what it looks like per square foot. So this is difficult. We need to acknowledge that. It's really difficult. We've been talking a lot about homes. We've about homeowners, I just also want you to understand rents are also high in the region, although there is good news for renters. Since the pandemic, those numbers have been coming down a bit and becoming a little more sensible. This chart is showing you what the average monthly apartment rate is. We define that in the pages of the index, how many bedrooms and so forth, but these are just averages. And so, as you can see, we're just behind New York with the highest rental prices. And I just think it's so interesting. You can get the same unit in Austin, Texas for about $1,500. In Portland, it would be about $1,800, but here in Silicon Valley, that very same unit is about $3,200, $3,400. That's the discrepancy between other American regions. We lay it down, we lay it out there by apartment type. Now, there's a technical term, it's called housing burden. Burden means that you are paying more than a third of your income for housing. That's what that means. And that's a threshold that's been established by government bodies. And if you're spending more than a third, that's considered risky or unsafe, and it's not recommended. The question is, where do we stand in Silicon Valley? Well, renters are burdened. In fact, many are severely burdened. 2023 is our last reporting year, and 45% of Silicon Valley renters are burdened. They're actually spending about 50% of their income on housing alone. It comes down a little bit with owners. Homeowners, 44% of our homeowners are currently burdened. And so you might think, oh, that's a good news. That's a good trend. Actually, the way to interpret that trend is that there are people coming to this region and they've already passed a threshold test. They're already at a certain income level, and that's why they're here, therefore. And so that's why we're seeing fewer homeowners burdened. Here's a chart that shows you how we stack up as a state against the other 49. And the darker you are in this map, the more burdened you are. And look, there's California all by itself, the most severely burdened state in the country. So there you have it. Now, here's another indicator that we track. It's the percentage of first-time home buyers who can go to the bank and qualify for the financing that would be required to purchase that median-priced home, the median-priced home. And Silicon Valley, the number is 25%. A quarter of first-time home buyers can go to the bank and get financing, as opposed to 53% of home buyers nationally. And then again, we see these same disparities. So here's who can qualify for housing across the different ethnicities, and you can see that it is our Asian and white residents who have higher rates of qualification, and that our Black and African American and our Hispanic and Latino residents are falling behind. A major factor here in housing security is if you're getting evicted. And as you can see, there are evictions happening across our region. This shows you the two counties. Those evictions were prohibited during the pandemic. That was a very humane thing of our policy apparatus to implement during the pandemic, but those restrictions have been lifted, and so lo and behold, we see, of course, what you might expect, which is rising evictions across the region. And we have to reckon with that because this is, of course, a major driver. And I do want to make this connection between housing and its availability and the phenomenon of homelessness, which is rising precipitously in our region. Sometimes people don't connect those dots. Sometimes people are inclined to say, well, our housing problem is a economic problem, or it can be characterized in other ways. That might also be true. We'll delve into that for a few minutes here. But the fact is, our homelessness problem is also a housing problem. We need to understand it in that way. This is your raw number. We can't be precise, it's impossible, but the census does ask on a regular basis. They take what we call a point-in-time count. And point-in-time count, and this is the number of unhoused residents in Silicon Valley as we define it. 12,524 people are unhoused in our region right now. This number does not include San Francisco. That is yet another substantial population of unhoused residents. Now, of all of those unhoused residents, we thought you might be interested to know how many are living and how many are in sheltering or transitional housing. So 68% of that figure are actually unsheltered. They're unsheltered, they're on the streets. And then 30%, roughly 30% are in some other form of housing right now. There are narratives that seek to explain the phenomenon. We're trying to understand it ourselves from the standpoint of data, and of course it's very difficult to do, hard to do. The narrative seems to be people become homeless because of poor life choices or dependencies and mental illness. Those are the things that are on people's list. But when you actually conduct interviews among the homeless population, again, this isn't science. We can't call this science. A lot of this becomes anecdotal, and of course, people are self-identifying. But there's something called the continuum of care, and they do this survey. And what the survey shows is that one of the leading causes is just the economic volatility. So people were living on that edge. There was a forcing event. They lost their job. They lost their employment. And so that is literally put them on the streets. That's followed by alcohol or drug use. That's followed by these other things, evictions, or people in flight. What are they fleeing? They're fleeing a bad marriage, divorce, an abusive situation, domestic violence. So we also need to be understanding homelessness in that way. Now, I want you to know that that number would be far higher. I'm convinced it would be double, maybe triple, were it not for the heroic efforts of an enormous apparatus that is government funded with our taxpayer dollars that are working to transition people out of homelessness, and then they are matched by nonprofit organizations, faith communities, and a host of other caring individuals who are trying to address these issues and to do it in systemic ways, looking at root causes, building infrastructure, trying to do all of the things that would help. Here's one indicator. This is a government program. This is Project Home Key. It's been active throughout the state. I just thought you'd be interested to know that we've been able to build 1,500 units, 1,500 units as a result of that particular program. We're leveraging some of it in our region. We should get an expert on the stage. I want you to meet Erik Solivan. He is the City of San Jose's housing director, and he's going to talk to us about this from the standpoint of his expertise. Erik, I want to thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you. The microphone right there. Now, I'm going to remind you that we have this polling technology. It's fun to use, so you can take the survey right now. We have done this scientifically across the region, and 47% of the people who responded said that they're considering leaving the region for these factors. But we just thought it'd be fun to take the temperature of the room. So let's see how this room feels about that question. Go ahead, you can do that on your survey, and they'll start posting results. While you're at it, we can look at this other question. That's the one I was hinting at earlier, which is the state is taking this strong role, and they're starting to introduce tough love on cities that aren't approving units at the rate that they think is required to meet the crisis. So, in other words, it spells a loss of local control. Is that a good trend, or is that an ominous trend? We're interested in your opinions on both of those questions. Erik, thank you for being here.
Great, glad to be here.
It's so nice to have you here. Now, here's my first question. You've done this in other places. You have You've worked at a number of cities. You've also worked in different capacities, including private sector.
Correct.
You are a guy that's built a lot of affordable housing. I want to know how this region compares to all those other places where you have worked. Harder to get done here, easier to get done here.
In general, it's a little harder to get done here for a lot of the reasons that your data stated. The costs are higher. The cost of land is higher. The cost of construction is higher. And so in order to get to abundant housing stock, in order to get to faster production, there are more challenges and more roadblocks to that path compared to Philadelphia or Denver, where I've worked in before.
A lot of people say that the biggest problem here is the NIMBY voice. Not here, not in my backyard. How does the NIMBY factor compare to those other places here, Silicon Valley versus the other places?
Well, I would say every community is different, and if you get into different sections of the city, that NIMBY voice is tough to compare in terms of city to city, because every neighborhood varies. What we've experienced here, there's a higher voice and willingness to bring various housing types into it, but also San Jose in particular has a high single-family rate. So converting to more density, converting to more apartments, that continues to be a challenge, and that's a growth area for the city.
Tell us about San Jose specifically. How is San Jose doing, and where is San Jose going?
A lot of similar challenges, as you mentioned in your data. The city continues to spur and try to find innovative ways to incentivize more housing production, but the numbers aren't there. In 2024, there were 0 market rate multifamily starts. So we passed downtown incentives, we passed multifamily growth area incentives to try to spur some of that development.
Is it too early to say whether those incentives are working?
There is the growth area incentive. We'll get 2 or 3 projects going, which is a good start, but there's a lot more to go.
What about housing in the downtown core? Bullish? Are you optimistic about that?
I would always say bullish because we're providing some good incentives, and we encourage everyone to look at that package of opportunity, and we're streamlining processes across our departments to do that.
Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier with our developer friend about conversions. First of all, San Jose's downtown is doing pretty good. Am I right?
Correct.
And what's driving that?
A lot of that is nightlife.
Yeah.
Nightlife is coming back, but office space, as you mentioned before, still a lot of vacancies.
Yeah. So is it possible to take any of those properties, do you think, and convert it, and is that a priority for the city?
Yes, it's possible, and there are a couple of projects that are starting to look at ways in which we can convert that office space into more residential uses.
Yeah. In a way that's cost effective.
Yes.
Yeah. And speaking of costs, what do we do about the cost of housing? Are there approaches that we can take to? I don't know what it would be. Frankly, it's mind-boggling to me. But how can you reduce the per unit price of an affordable unit? What are the tools available?
We have to look at different ways in which, particularly on the affordable side versus the market rate side, the way we fund affordable housing, looking at alternative strategies to that financing into that capital stack. On the market rate side, we have to look at ways in which we improve cost reductions, alternative ways of getting to land acquisitions to reduce that holding period, and then streamlining those processes.
What are those ways, those specific ways? Be very granular with me for a minute.
Sure. So on the affordable housing side, one of the challenges that the state has is around tax credits as well as bond cap. Those are 2 limitations. The processes move slow. So where do we find alternative ways of bringing equity into these projects since the rents are lower? Because we need more affordable housing, as clearly stated on the graphs and charts you showed before. So where do we bring alternative forms of equity through public-private partnerships, working with groups who are willing to think innovatively, Sabrata organization and many others who are trying to find new strategies for equity.
Would you say a word about public-private partnerships? And again, I'm always interested in the comparative piece. Were there lots of those kinds of partnerships in these other cities where you have worked?
Yes.
And how would you compare them to what's going on here? And what are the keys to a successful partnership?
So there are 3 keys to a successful public-private partnership. One is, where do we find ways to innovate on both sides of the ledger? Where do we, in working with labor groups as an example, as we did a lot in Philadelphia, to bring both pension opportunities where you can loan against that pension of labor and then provide units to the workforce who are actually pulling it in. So innovative strategy there. 2 is look at alternative ways to raise capital that doesn't require a tax credit and bond cap chase, where you instead can loan against existing portfolio values and bring that equity into the capital stack that moves far faster. And then 3, where do you look at ways to get to cost reductions? The more that we can incentivize long-term holds in your asset portfolio, there are better ways to improve that and reduce that cost at the outset.
I see. Hey, how are we coming on that survey? Have we posted a result? I'm curious to know if folks in the room are thinking of moving out of the region. Maybe you're seeing the outcome on your device. And then I do want to pose this question to you directly. Our state is getting tough. Okay, here we go. This is the question that we've posed. And folks in the room think it's good that the state's getting tough on the locals. But how do you assess that power dynamic?
It's always a balancing act, considering speed as well as ensuring we're bringing in community voices and balancing community needs while maintaining a strong progression towards our RHINA goals. So where do you find that balancing act to ensure that we're addressing all levels of affordability, servicing our needs, including our unhoused population, which the county has also done a lot of great work in partnering with the city on? So where do we find those areas of innovation that meet kind of this public need to move faster?
Yeah. Our state getting aggressive out of the State House. Was that happening in other states in your experience?
California is unique in that regard, that is for sure.
Oh, really?
In Pennsylvania, there's not much state push towards housing. California is sort of leading the way of getting municipalities to relook at zoning rules, to look at ways in which they are taking proactive steps to get to more production.
Yep, good. And then I was curious to know if folks in the room are thinking of leaving the region. Well, just post that result when we have it. Here's a question for you. Here's my last question for you.
Yeah.
With my magic wand, I now make you the housing czar for the entire Bay Area. What will you do?
I think the best investments that I would do is where do we maximize production by taking the immense wealth that this region has and leveraging that with the wealth that we have on the public sector and bring those two together to streamline and get to the creation of units at warp speed.
Yep. I said it was my last question, but this is my last question. Straight answer. Is San Jose going to make its RHNA goals?
At this time, probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Erik Solivan. Thank you. We really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. Well, that's the housing front. So how are we doing on the income front? And we'd like to talk about that over our next few minutes. Picture of annual earnings in Silicon Valley. So take a look at this. Here we go. In Silicon Valley, our average annual earnings are about 170. Actually, we're moving up towards $180,000.
When you hold it down low, hold it up here.
So hold it up here. Yeah. Thank you. Is that better? Is that helping? Yeah. That's Ashley, everybody. Yeah. Apparently, I was blocking the receiver if I hold it down here. Hopefully this helps. Okay, so I'm just trying to help you understand that in Silicon Valley, we have the nation's highest average annual earnings, and they're approaching $200,000. And in fact, in San Francisco, they have now exceeded $200,000. Now, those are averages, and remember, averages are highly skewed because we have very high earners in Silicon Valley. Nevertheless, look at the national figure. It's $70,000. So our average is more than twice. In fact, it's 2.4 times the national average. 4 years ago, it was only 2.1. In other words, that gap between the national and what we're doing here locally is also continuing to grow. So this is a stunning chart. It just it's one of the most distinctive properties of our region. However, we should also understand that there are racial disparities here as well. So if you are a white member of our population, your average is approaching 160,000, but if you're these other races, they're progressively lower, and that's been the case for some time in our region. Now, I think we've always understood that there's a correlation between income and educational attainment. And we've always told our kids, go to college, and we're usually able to see that correlation in a clear way. And this lays it out very clearly for you, with our highest paid members having achieved a graduate or a professional degree. But here's something that is very discouraging, and we're just going to put it here in front of you. This shows you the per capita income by race and ethnicity, and it shows you the population all holding the same degree. In other words, we've controlled your educational attainment. So everybody on this chart, everybody in the green bars has a college degree. And yet, our white residents with college degrees are earning 60% more than our Hispanic or Latino residents who also have the same college degree. That's a profound disparity in our region, and that one right there is probably way up on our to-do list. It's also interesting that we have a gender gap in Silicon Valley, and we measure that in the index. I recommend the granularity in there. You should take a look at it. But men are making more than women, and what we've discovered is that women at the same educational attainment level are making about 70 cents for every dollar that men are making in the marketplace. It's a strange result, and that is also on Silicon Valley's to-do list. This is a chart that's showing the inequities in terms of growth across percentiles. So let me see if I can explain this. If you're in the high percentile, if you're in the 90th percentile, in other words, earning a large amount of money and you're in that 90th percentile, your income grew over the past 20 years by 30%. Okay? So our high earners are also experiencing earnings growth, and they're experiencing that growth at a very high rate, 30%. Now, if you're in the middle percentile, you also achieved income growth, but only at a rate of 14%. If you are in the lower percentiles, let's say if you're in the 20th percentile, no growth in your wages over the past 20 years. And if you are in the 10th percentile, the bottom percentile, you've actually experienced negative growth. So it is also a very real phenomenon in Silicon Valley that our high earners keep earning more and at higher rates, and the rest are experiencing stagnating wages. And that's something that we have, we need a lot of dialogue and discussion and action on that front. Now, we talked about income, and we talked about how we have a lot of high earners, but we also have a lot of people that are not high on that spectrum, and they are experiencing the kind of wage stagnation that we just described, and they're also getting slammed by rising costs. You know, the impact of inflation lands differentially across the spectrum, and it's especially people that are in our lower percentiles. And then we have documented one of the things that's making it especially hard in Silicon Valley, and that would be the exponential growth of child care costs. In this chart, we're showing you the percentage change of child care costs over just the past 3 years. And would you believe that they've gone up 37%? the cost of childcare has gone up 37%. So your monthly cost, if you need full-time care of one child, is about $4,800 in Silicon Valley. Annually, that'd be about $57,000. And that's a 37% increase over the last 3 years. It's to the point where actually households that are struggling with getting by are identifying childcare as the biggest challenge. Not the housing, but the childcare as the thing that is causing the most stress. So that's one thing. Also, there's been a very high relative change in transportation costs. We estimate that a household in the middle segment needs to spend about $10,000 a year on transportation, and that has been a high percentage. And so folks are identifying those two categories as among the biggest challenges to living in the region. No surprise, we have segments of our community who are living in poverty or living beneath the self-sufficiency standard. Just so you know, the federal government has a standard that they call the poverty standard, and then they publish those measurements. In Silicon Valley, we've decided that that standard isn't very helpful because it doesn't factor in local conditions, including the high cost of our housing, or like we just showed you, the high cost of our childcare. And so we thought there should be a local measure, and we developed that in partnership with the academic community, and we call that the self-sufficiency standard. And I'll just lay it out for you. In Silicon Valley, 30% of households are not self-sufficient. 30%, so it's almost a third. And that means that those households, in order to subsist, are receiving some form of assistance, and that would be a government program, it would be family and friends, it would be help from your faith community, or some other method. Okay, so 30%, and then that's the percentage of children in Silicon Valley who are living in households that are not self-sufficient. Not surprisingly, are serving up millions of meals per year to families that are experiencing food insecurity, and that number continues to increase. I thought this was fascinating. The food is served up by a combination of federal programs, but those meals are also being served by the nonprofit organizations, NGOs, and other non-governmental programs, and they're sharing the burden relatively equally. I thought that too was a striking finding. Okay, quickly over some other things. In Silicon Valley, guess what? There are 104 billionaires. There are 145,000 millionaires. And we mean in liquid wealth, right? We're not talking about the value of the house. So that's the kind of region that we live in. It's a place where people can be fabulously successful. This is the Gini coefficient. This tells you about the distribution of that wealth and of that income. 1 on the scale, or 100 on the scale, means that one person is holding all of the wealth. And 0 on the scale means that all of the people are holding all of the wealth equally. Guess where we are in Silicon Valley? We should have given you a quiz on this. In the 1990s, we were at in the 30s on that scale, in the 30s. Today, we're above 80 on the Gini. That's a remarkable finding, I'm telling you that. It's really quite something. Most people will tell you those are the conditions for instability and for revolt. Households in the top 10% hold 71% of the wealth. By the way, we did the calculation. If we were 0 on the Gini coefficient, every household would have $1 million. $1 million, yeah. So that's interesting. Households in the bottom half are holding 1% of the wealth. That's how we should understand this. So the top are holding more than 70%, and by the way, that grew 1 percentage point over the past year, and the bottom half holding on to 1% of it. Now, this has interesting ramifications. One of them is political. I think we've always understood that Silicon Valley is a very blue place. That's been the conventional understanding of it. If you interpret the last election as a populist election where there was sentiment being expressed against elites and high earners and so on and so forth, then we have to dutifully report that there is some of that sentiment appearing in Silicon Valley as well. This is a chart that shows you how cities voted over in the last election, in the November election. And the support for our president grew 43% in this region since 2016, his first election. 43% growth. So we need to understand our region in that way too. Kamala Harris is from this region. This is very striking. She actually lost ground in the 24 election compared to the 2020 election, when she was also on the ballot as vice president. So these figures are factoring in to the milieu, the vibe, the mindset in Silicon Valley as well. We may be a place with increasing populist pressures, and a lot of those pressures targeted at elite members of our society. I want you to meet Barrie Hathaway. Join me on stage, please, Barrie. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer of JobTrain. Thank you. There's a microphone for you. Barrie, we appreciate you being here. Barrie has spent his career, actually he started his career in the private sector and then had a clarifying life event, and you decided that this was your life's work. It was helping people find paths to upward mobility. And so I'm hoping to talk to you about that. And we're all looking for wisdom. We're looking for insight. In a punishing place like this, with the cost structures that I just reviewed, and with the concentrations of wealth, what is the path upward? And if you were giving the region a report card, just specifically in terms of economic mobility, upward mobility in the way that we've organized to help on those fronts, how are we doing?
I would say, first of all, that there is a ton of opportunity here in our region, and that in many, many cases, the individuals who are currently very low income can have those jobs with the right training and education. So the opportunities are there. The challenges are really that when you're very low income, you're facing a maze of barriers and challenges. And it isn't just about getting trained, and it isn't just about getting educated. It is about having those needs met so that you can get trained and educated, so that you can continue through the job search process and travel upward with economic mobility. We can't do it oftentimes when we're facing these healthcare challenges, childcare challenges, transportation challenges, cost of housing. These things combine and get worse and worse the lower you are from an income perspective.
Talk about it from the standpoint of systemic issues. And I'll ask it in the same way that I posed it to Erik earlier. Let's say we put you in charge, the whole thing, you're in charge. How do you address the systemic issues?
Well, there's a couple of directions that I would go here. One is that you talked about the wage gaps for people of color and for women, right? The first thing we have to do is recognize that those are real. That we can't sugarcoat this, right? We have a system that is designed to support the status quo. And even if we don't want to be supporting the status quo, we are a part of that system. And so we had a situation where I work. We are 73% people of color at the staff level and the management level. And yet we had somebody who came to us and said, my peer over here who has the same skills and experience I have is making more than me. Can you help me understand that? She wanted to know, how is it possible? And I'm like, oh, come on, there's some reason for that. Of course, we're not doing that. And we went in and we looked at it and we found, sure enough, these two people, man and woman, he made more than her. And frankly, he made more because he negotiated his salary. And so what we did was we were taken aback by this. And we stepped back and we really looked at our systems. And we realized that, in fact, we were not changing our systems to combat these inequities. So we had to do things like our offers, when we make a job offer now, it's the best and final offer. That's it. We don't negotiate. So you're going to make that wage for this job with that level of experience. And we changed a whole bunch of internal things. So first of all, we have to check ourselves here. We may not be racist. We may not be sexist. But we are working in systems and in a world where those things exist. And we have to look at our own doggone systems and make sure that we're not perpetuating that. So that's the first thing I do.
Good. What's the second thing?
Pardon?
What's the second thing?
The second thing would be to change our workforce systems in some fundamental ways. We have a system, a workforce system here and everywhere that includes like the workforce development boards, Nova Works, Work to Future, and nonprofits like JobTrain. We have these systems in place. They are designed today to work in a way that is, let us help you get into a job or a career. And when you persist for a year, go team, you've won. We're all done, let's move on. But in reality, a year is not enough time for somebody to actually make it to a point where they're economically stable. We need more time. So I would change the system so that they support people for longer as they're making their upward mobility journey. And I would really change the way we interact with employers. I don't want to work with employers anymore who aren't creating a great environment and treating their employees the way they should be treated. So we're not going to do that anymore. So this workforce system just needs to think longer term. We think too short term. We think a year out, that's success, we're done. When in reality, it's probably 5 years out to get to a point where you have that economic sustainability.
You have a lot of support in this room. What's the third plank of your program? Is there one? While you're thinking about that, what about the education system? We sort of have this one-size-fits-all, and we just crank people through that system.
Yeah.
There are other models where you specialize earlier, and it's connected more directly to vocational choices. Is that a better model? We're voting on that. Go ahead and vote.
Oh, well, I'll let you vote first. Let me say about what the third plank for me would be.
Please.
And I just had it in my mind now. I have to come back to it. Got it. So part of the problem in our world, in our nonprofit world with services, is that all of us do our jobs really well. Housing does a good job, and childcare does a good job, and we all do a good job independently, but we're very siloed. So if a person needs all of those things, they're not going to get them. Or if they do get them, it's because they're really smart and they've really figured out how to work the system. So we need more collective action, collaboration among service providers to make sure that it's easy for a client to get the services they need so they can keep that upward mobility.
Good. Okay, so what about this? A more specialized curriculum that attaches to vocational choices.
Yeah. First of all, we are moving in the direction of skills-based jobs, and that's really a good thing. I would say that we know that higher education is a path to upward mobility, so we're all in on the higher education idea. But there are a lot of people who are not ready for that. High school seniors who are not going to go to college right away. How do we help them think about skills-based jobs that could help them earn a good living and either stay there and grow their skills, or while they're doing that, get higher education. So it's not one or the other. It's the right combination of the two that's going to make the difference.
We're out of time. It's been terrific having you on stage. Thank you for your insight. Ladies and gentlemen, Barrie Hathaway. Thank you. Thank you. We've reached that point. We have one more break, but